45 minutes, 5:10 per mile. All right, so that's job done. You know, that was bloody good. That's 45 minutes of effort. It's warm. It's actually really warm. On the actual tempo itself, I'm supposed to drink probably 2 to 3 times, which in a session like that, because it's warm and because you're sort of burning through glycogen at that sort of like threshold effort, if you're not fueling, what you notice happen towards the end of the session is not only is heart rate going up, but your pace is going down. And it's not a fitness thing, it's just that you're starting to sort of run out of fuel, especially when you're, you know, in sort of a moderately heavy block of training. Your glycogen's already a little bit sort of depleted. And so most people probably think of fueling as, I'll fuel during the marathon, I'll fuel during my long runs. You probably don't think about fueling in a sort of 45-minute threshold. But what you're going to notice from my splits is, even though I was fueling, the quality towards the end still dipped a little bit, especially in some of the sort of recovery reps. And so what we were doing today was 3 minutes at sort of LT2, which is your, probably my half marathon effort, your sort of second threshold, and then 3 minutes at that lower threshold. And you're just flipping between those efforts. And the problem is, it's achievable. It's not easy, but it's achievable. And so you have to sort of keep that focus, find a rhythm, and just really find your way with it. But fueling can really, really help. Today I was using more tan, some carbs, and then also the ketones, which we can talk a little bit about later. But I'm gonna go home, shower, and then I'll talk you through how it went. So I think it goes without saying, today was, you know, a really great day. That was a really good session. And I really want to delve into sort of the execution of that session and how I was able to probably keep the paces in a good place even towards the end of the session and not sort of like fall off, which is what maybe a lot of you guys might experience. It's something that I've definitely experienced, is when you're doing a longer effort like that or a longer sustained tempo. I was alternating paces, but once you sort of get beyond sometimes 15-20 minutes, either one of two things happens, or both. Heart rate, you know, starts to go up, pace maybe starts to slow, and you have to act. And that act is push harder to maintain the same pace, or slow down to sort of let the heart rate come down. And so today, you know, was a good day. I think it's almost worth celebrating a pretty good day. In running, it can be, you know, even at, you know, my level, which is like the professional level, good days can be few and far between, which means in the warm-up, I was telling Ethan, who, you know, comes and helps bike and film at the moment, I was telling him that probably 8 times out of 10, you're going in the park to, you know, kind of get it done. It's rare, in other words, which would be, you know, 20% of the time, that you have a really good day. The human brain clings to the really good days. So you only remember the really good days, which is why when you feel normal, how you're going to feel most of the time, you kind of get a bit pissed off and frustrated with that. And so probably do everybody a favor and, you know, comment below if you sort of know where I'm coming from, and it'll probably help reassure everybody else that they're not alone. I think that's very common. We do cling to those days where we feel really good, and then we want more days to feel like that. That's kind of how it goes. So today, from a session perspective, was, you know, really simple. It was 45 minutes. You do 3 minutes at what would be your upper threshold, and then you do 3 minutes at your lower threshold. It's a really good way to introduce yourself into some longer thresholds, and by backing off that little bit, even though the speed doesn't slow, you know, hugely, and you'll see throughout this video, the pace is sort of fluctuating. What it does allow is to calm everything down, bring that heart rate back down, and then also keep the quality a bit higher when you're sort of going back to that upper threshold without having that sort of effort getting too high. So you're moving above what would be upper threshold to try to maintain pace. So a really good day. I was honestly really, really happy with that. I will say it again, I think I said it on a previous video, what has really helped is just keeping things pretty simple. I haven't been traveling anywhere. I haven't been, you know, thinking about altitude or thinking about going warm weather training somewhere. I've just kept things really simple. The main focus for today's video, and this is a sponsored video by Ketone IQ, and rather than give you a rundown on Ketone IQ and you know, tell you that the link's in the description, and it is, I'll talk more about the fueling aspect of today
and then how I sort of prepare for today, and then what I'm doing throughout the session today to maintain a level of performance. I'm really lucky that, you know, Ketone IQ sponsors me. It helps to sponsor the channel, and that's fantastic. But I promise you that if I could also not get it, you know, sponsored, I'd be using it, because that's what keeps the quality of today's session pretty high. And there's no sponsored talk behind that. I'm just giving it to you real. It really does help. And so I wear what you might see on my quad, which is called a Moxy sensor. And that, again, this is not sponsored, I'm just telling you a fact. I wear that Moxy sensor. It kind of tracks O2 saturation. And there's a direct correlation between O2 correlation and lactate. So as O2 sort of saturation goes down, you know, lactate's going up. It's kind of that simple. And so on a session like today, it's brilliant because you can just keep an eye on that sort of like percentage of O2 saturation, and it's kind of showing you where you are on that sort of like threshold. So if I'm sitting at sort of 27, 28% on the O2 saturation, that's like the upper, you know, level of threshold. My lactate's going to be 2.8, 3.0. I've tested this a lot. Then if I when I back off, I have to back off enough on the sort of 3-minute easier to let that saturation come back to sort of 30, 31%, which is 1.5 to 2.0 lactate. Try to ignore the specific numbers of the lactate, and really all it's telling you is what energy you're burning, right? That's really that simple. How much energy you're burning, how much carbohydrates you're using. And so why then it gets to fueling? I used that today, it worked really well. You're looking at push for 3 minutes, get it to 28%, back off a bit, get it to 30, 31. And the heart rate's kind of doing similar, but Moxy is a lot quicker than what heart rate would be. So sometimes heart rate has relaxed, sometimes perceived effort has actually came down quite a lot, where you're thinking to yourself, this must be sort of like my lower end of threshold. But Moxy can take a bit before it gets back to, actually from an energy perspective, you're back to sort of that first threshold. And sometimes you have to back off more than you would have liked. I'll intervene quickly here by saying, I kind of love that, because I love that you probably could have gone faster. You definitely could have gone faster. But when you wear a tool like Moxy, you get to see real change, not just perceived effort, not just the heart rate, which can vary because of heat and all things like this. This is showing real change. And so I probably could have gone 450 to 455 per mile on the upper threshold bit, and then probably kept it slower at sort of 520, maybe even 515. But if I was going to wear this technology, I had to kind of pay attention to it. Now we get the fueling. I've learned by fueling a lot of my training, not just the marathon sessions, not just, you know, the really long specific days, even though today was pretty long. But basically over any 1 hour of training that you're out there training, your body needed 80 grams of carbs in that hour. And where ketones comes in is you can take your 80 grams of carbs and you can take an amount of ketones. I take roughly 2 to 3 shots per hour. And what's that then doing is saving some of the carbohydrates by using the ketones, which is that sort of like fat as fuel. The reason I've been doing that more lately is I heard that a lot of the Ironman people are doing it. I know it's very important in the Tour de France, which is going on right now. But in other words, what we're trying to do now is get through each day of training the best quality possible at the minimal cost. If I don't take any fuel today, if I don't have the ketones this morning with my breakfast, I have 2 shots at about 8 o'clock. I'm then leaving the house at about 10 o'clock. After I finish the warm up, I have 1 shot, and then I have my mixture of 80 grams of carbs with the 2 shots of ketones, sometimes 3, in the mixture of carbohydrates that you'll see me drinking through the session. If I take all of that away and I just have breakfast, I can still do a pretty good quality session. If I was wearing Moxy, what you're going to notice is after sort of 25-30 minutes, especially with that heat, is heart rate would have continued to rise, O2 saturation would have dropped a bit further, and I would have had to slow. It's the same as on my steady run days. If I fuel the steady runs, I can keep heart rate, pace, and moxie in a great place throughout the sort of 45 to 60 minutes. In other words, when you're slowing, if you're slowing in training, if you're slowing in a race, if you're slowing in a session, often it's because of something else sometimes than fitness. We always think it's fitness. Sometimes it's just heat. If it's getting hotter and hotter, that's a tough thing. But if you're in a pretty decent block of training and you're not eating way too much, which is kind of impossible, you are going to be riding sort of a fine line of possibly being depleted of glycogen. And so if you're not fueling even just a steady run, or maybe your long run or your tempo sessions, what happens is it's just like driving your car and getting low on fuel. It's really that simple. It's almost like an impossible thing to check. We don't have a live glycogen reader in the muscles, but I've seen it happen almost live when I'm not out there, you know, with the fuel and I'm doing that tempo run and maybe I'm on my third 10-minute block and the pace just kind of drops quite drastically. And I get frustrated by it. And I'm kind of like, what the, is this fitness or you know, what's going on? And often it's just that you've ran out of sort of glycogen in the muscles, and had you been fueling, not only would fueling help that day's training, but then it helps you recover that little bit better towards the next day's training. And if you can go into that next day's training a little bit better sort of prepared, a little bit better recovered, the quality of that day's training can be a little bit better. And we now live in a world where people are packing quality into a week's training. And the only way to do that over a long period of time without getting tired, without getting injured, is to make sure you're taking care of all the little things. And the little things is just, can you fuel? Can you hydrate after training? Is it important to start practicing some of this fueling stuff? You can check ketones out. This is a sponsored post, there's no doubt about that. But I have loved using ketones in my training. I use it little bits before, I use it little bits after, because apparently, based on the studies, it helps that glycogen reuptake, which means it helps your body in the process of getting glycogen back into the muscles. It's all about little things, little details around the training. Can you execute the training better because you were fueling? Can you sort of recover a bit quicker and better because you fueled during and then because you're fueling a little bit after? Don't think that this fueling thing is only for marathon, or it's only for long runs, or it's only for race day. If you can, start practicing some of this stuff during the training. I'm trying to do every sort of 2 mile, make sure I'm taking on some fuel, especially in the steady days and especially on a day like today. But it did go really good. Like I said, I wore the Moxie, which means there's an honesty to it. It means that if I post a video in 2 weeks' time and I've done the exact same session and I tell you that I was a bit quicker, you'll know that I was actually quicker because of fitness benefits, not quicker because I pushed a little bit harder that day or I tried a little bit harder. It will kind of be like real data. I must be fitter because I sort of kept Moxie in those similar places and it allowed for me to see actual progress. And then you can appreciate that progress more. There's a little humbling effect. There's a little you're gonna have to drop the ego effect, because like I said, there were parts that I was like, I know I could still run 520s here. I know the heart rate would actually be okay, but I need to back off because, you know, Moxie's still saying 27, 28%, and we need it back over 30 during this recovery part. Look, there's way more information on joggingroom.com. I like this educational style. It's how I am. I like to hopefully show you some of the stuff that I'm doing on a daily basis that can help your running. There's training plans on there. There's merchandise at joggingclo.com. Check all those things out. It really helps the channel. If you can like and subscribe, that also really helps the channel. And then I can keep paying people like Ethan to come help and put out good content. But take care. Thanks for watching.